says that we will be forced to reduce spending next year if we do not increase our enrollment. So if we are able to maintain the quality of education we provide, we must market our programs more aggressively. And without such marketing, we will be unable to increase our enrollment.
All right, so what is our conclusion here?
So we must market our programs more aggressively if we are able to maintain the quality of education we provide.
Yeah, so if we want to maintain our education level, we must market aggressively. And why are we saying that?
Because without that marketing, they're not able to increase the enrollment. And if they don't increase the enrollment, they'll be forced to reduce the spending.
Yes. What kind of question is this?
Must be true.
What do you think, Kamani?
Sufficient assumption.
Yeah, because we're saying the conclusion can be properly drawn if what is assumed. And so what is the goal of a sufficient assumption question, Jenny? Oh, she just went away. Ashley.
Is that I forgot. I know you have to do the conditional statements. You have to diagram this one.
Potentially.
Goal.
Kind of. Anna, what do you think? What is the goal of a sufficient assumption question?
To bridge the gap between the conclusion and the premise.
Yeah, so all we want to do is we want to pick the answer that guarantees our conclusion. So we're saying like it's almost like a super strengthened question, right? We're saying like what is the unsaid premise or the unsaid fact that we need for our conclusion to be true? And so these are the best for predicting. Like you're a gold mine if you can predict these. And so we're saying, like, just like Jessica said, we're saying like, hey, if we want to stay at the same level, we have to market aggressively, because if we don't market aggressively, we can't increase enrollment, and we'll have to reduce spending if we don't increase enrollment. So what could we potentially say that would guarantee that we have to market our programs aggressively to keep at the same level of education? Like, what must we care about? Or what must we not want to do?
We don't want to reduce enrollment or decrease in enrollment.
We don't, but why don't we want to?
Because we want to keep the quality.
Well, yes, but what does that have to do with anything? Like, why are we saying this? Or like what does the quality of education have anything to do with marketing things, have anything to do with enrollment, and anything to do with, that's all I'm going to say, because then I'll give it away.
Because you need that in order to market your programs more aggressively.
What might, like, okay, so they're saying we will be forced to reduce spending next year if we do not increase our enrollment. Like, well, who cares? Like, at this point, I'm like, who cares if we have to reduce our spending? That's my opinion. Like, don't increase your enrollment, decrease your spending, whatever. But if we're to maintain the quality of education, we must market our programs more aggressively, because if we don't market them aggressively, we will be unable to increase our enrollment. So do we ever talk about what increasing the enrollment and reducing spending is in relation to our conclusion? My prediction here was maybe like we can't maintain the quality of education and reduce our spending. Would that work? Would that bridge the gap? What answer choices were we debating between here?
I was between C and D.
Okay, so does anybody know why one of those is wrong?
Because I think C is wrong because if you do like a conditional, like if you say if you market the programs more aggressively, I have it as if you don't necessarily know if that will increase enrollment. Like it's not guaranteed.
But even if we do market aggressively and we increase enrollment, does that have anything to do with maintaining the quality of education we provide? Do we see how C doesn't connect to our conclusion at all? Do we see that? Where D tells us that the university will not maintain the quality of education. So this is taking the variable that in our conclusion that we need to connect to something else. If it, or sorry, the university will not maintain quality, will not provides if it reduces spending next year. That actually was my exact prediction, but this is telling us like why we don't want to reduce spending and so why we need to get our enrollment up. This connects and it connects it back to the quality of education.
Wait, so like when you do sufficient assumption questions, like how do you pick up on what's missing? Like does it just come like intuitively like to you or like what?
No, I worked on it for a really long time. So here I'm thinking, what could I think one, it's good to practice sufficient assumption on easier questions. So for starters and practice predicting on easier ones. Here I'm thinking about what's the variable that isn't brought in anywhere into our conclusion. So the conclusion, when I think about here, sorry, let me take a step back. Our conclusion brings in maintaining the quality of education we provide. I need something to connect to maintaining the quality of education.
So like the answer choice will for sure mention quality, right? Like it just has to.
Like I truly want to say yes to this. I can't think of another way that this would work.
Mm.
Because we're saying if this, we must do this. But like, why do we need to do this? We obviously have to care about this part. But we don't talk about this anywhere. So it's like, well, why does this matter? Like, how can we say this sufficient condition or this conditional statement if we don't even know why this matters? And I think it's also reading it critically where it says we will be forced to reduce our spending if we do not increase our enrollment. I can try, do you want me to diagram this to show you? Okay. So this is saying we will be forced to reduce spending next year if we do not increase our enrollment. So if we do not increase enrollment, then we will be forced to reduce spending. So if we are to maintain the quality education, so we keep our quality of education, we must market aggressively. Without marketing aggressively, we will be unable to increase enrollment. So if we don't market aggressively, we cannot increase enrollment. Our conclusion is this part. And so do we ever connect marketing aggressively and quality education? No, so we have to somehow connect this to this to get to our conclusion. How do you feel about that?
I could see that. I mean, it makes sense now that I like drew it out.
Does anybody, Kamani, do you see it?
No, this one was really hard for me. I'm gonna have to like really like look into it. I don't know, and like watch your video again. It's just like not clicking.
Okay, so for worst case scenario, were we able to cross any off?
I was pretty confident.
Universe will not maintain the quality of education. Yeah, that's like going backwards.
I think C I eliminated pretty quickly.
University will increase its enrollment if it markets it. So it's saying like if we market aggressively, then we will increase its enrollment. That does not bring in the variables we need for our conclusion. Like our two variables here. So that can't be it. B says that if it increases enrollment, so now we're putting increasing enrollment in the sufficient. So if we increase enrollment, then we will not need to reduce spending next year. Well, that doesn't bring in our conclusion at all. It doesn't bring in quality of education, like the variable that we need. So it can't be B. And then E says the university will not need to reduce spending next year if it markets its programs more aggressively. So if we market more aggressively, then we will not need to reduce spending. Well, once again, that doesn't bring in quality education. So I do think this is one that you can get to by process of elimination if you go slow. But this one was probably hard for people at number 20 and you start running out of time.
So I guess like when we're